Welcome, I'm Rogers Anderson as we travel around Williamson County and pick up the topics that we want to talk about for today and for the end of the year. We have an opportunity to have a discussion with Chad Gray. Thanks for being with us today.
It's great to be here today, Mayor Anderson.
Chad's in charge of all the elections in Williamson County, and he's got an unbelievable hard job during that period of time, and keeping up with all the registrations that go on within our county. Just all the people moving in and coming in and talking to you and getting registered to vote. And for you that are watching the show and haven't registered to vote, it's really simple anymore. But before we actually get into your job, let's find out a little bit about Chad and where you came from and kind of your interest in life, and how did you wind up as in the role that you're in today?
Well, it's great to be here, Rogers. I grew up in Franklin. I'm Chad Gray, the administrator of elections, and I'm glad to be here. I went to the Williamson County schools. I graduated from Page High School in 1991, and I went to Western Kentucky University to college. I got a degree in history, which is it's a passion of mine still today, but I've been working with elections in the county since 2000, and I was appointed the administrator in 2015, in July of that year.
Well, you spent many hours in your formative early years working there, learning all the items that need to be considered, because most people pull out their card on election day, either early or on the election day, and vote. But there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes in getting you registered, verified. Kind of take us through those steps and how people and the importance of voting is so important. I can't stress that, not just because I'm an elected official, but it's the one time at the one election that you get to have a voice and actually who you want to vote for and to represent you on that either city, county, state, or federal level.
Yeah, voter registration is extremely easy today. It's really changed over the years. At one point, you had to go in person to register to vote. The laws were changed in the mid-1990s, allowing you to register by mail and register when you got your driver's license renewed and that sort of thing. So it's a extremely easy process. And earlier this year, our General Assembly had passed online voter registration, and that's been implemented this fall. And we're certainly pleased to jump into the 21st century on that front. And we've had a good many already register online, but it's a very easy process. You know, we live in a world today where people do so many things online, and voter registration just seems to be a natural aspect to the whole process that we feel like will make it much easier.
Kind of take us through the processes, how that works. I know you've got a card there to kind of guide you through and explain to people the way it works.
Well, when you become a resident of the county and you're, of course, 18 years of age, you are entitled to register. You have to be a citizen of the United States. You have to be at least 18 years of age on or before the next election. And you have to have not been convicted of a crime which is considered a felony. Now, if you have been convicted, you can go through the process of getting your rights restored. But you complete that form if you're entitled to do so. And after that process is complete, we will mail you a voter registration card, which proves that you have registered. And we'd like for you to take that when you go to vote. But today, we only require a Tennessee or federal issued photo ID when you appear in person to vote. But it's nice to have the voter registration card. It gives all of your county districts, your county commission districts, your school board districts. If you live in one of the cities, it indicates that on that card as well.
So I think it's important to point out in our county, we have 24 county commissioners.
We do.
We have 12 school board members. And we have a whole bunch of other candidates, city and county and state. But on that card or on that identification, based on where you live, we'll tell you where to go to vote on the election day of itself. Now,
that is correct.
we have early voting. Kind of talk us through a little bit about early voting. That's been around several years now.
It has. Early voting started in the 1990s, and at that time it was pretty cutting edge. You know, there were only just a handful of states that allowed voters to cast a ballot early. Before that time in Tennessee, you had to have a specific reason, and you had to declare that reason why you could not vote on Election Day. But early voting begins 20 days prior to every election, and it's a huge convenience for many of our voters. We live in a world today where people travel a lot for their jobs or for other reasons, and so early voting has made a huge difference, especially in big presidential or gubernatorial elections when there's a huge and higher turnout. But it's been a huge convenience for our voters, and it always begins 20 days prior, and it normally ends 5 days before Election Day. Now, you might want to know why it has to end. We have to get all of our records in order before the actual Election Day. So we have to have a day to actually stop early voting in order to get everything ready for Election Day.
And I think it would be noteworthy because here at the Administrative Complex, where we're actually doing this taping of the show, on the election day itself, regardless of what election it is, there are always people that come here that do not normally vote here. In fact, we don't vote here on Election Day.
Exactly.
You are required, once that during early voting, the doors are open, it's staffed. You can vote no matter where you're from at early voting and any of the early voting precincts.
Exactly.
But once the Election Day gets there, you do have to go back out to your individual area that's been designated on your card to vote. And as many times as we stress that always seems to come up. Well, I've always voted here. Well,
Right.
You early voted here, but not on your day.
That is correct. That can be very confusing
Sure
for our
can.
voters. We, at times, for a big presidential election, for instance, we'll have up to 7 early voting sites. But on Election Day, you're correct. You have to vote in the precinct in which you reside. So that is required. So it's helpful if you inform yourself as a voter to make sure you understand that in Tennessee we have 3 different ways to cast a ballot. You can go on Election Day. Our polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You can vote early at any designated early voting site, regardless of where you live in the county. Or you can vote by mail or absentee, and that's the 3rd category of voting in Tennessee. So those are the 3 ways you can cast a ballot here.
And Chad, none of this is possible without men and women that are working, not only in your office, but in all of those voting precincts throughout Williamson County. And there's probably people watching this thinking, well, that's something I could do. Explain how that process works if an individual wanted to work for you on that early voting or on the day of the election.
Well, it's a huge part of what we do. For a big election, it will require up to 500 poll officials across the county that work at our 43 precincts that we have open in the county. So it's extremely important. A lot of voters come in, they thank us or thank the poll officials for volunteering. They're not actually volunteering. We do compensate those poll officials. Now, it's not a lot of money, but we do compensate them. So that's been that's what really is what we rely on heavily. We have a lot of retirees. Here recently, we've tried to invoke some of the Tennessee Promise and the Tennessee Achieve students into devoting their community service to working at the polls. But you just have to complete an application. You have to be a registered voter, and you have to be at least 17 years of age if you're a high school student to vote, or I'm sorry, to work at the polls. So it's a very simple process. You fill out an application. We'll put you to work. It's very important. We could not do any of this without our poll officials working out.
It is another one of those public service things. You're not going to get rich doing it. Now, you will meet some new friends, and we have some poll workers that every single year they're here.
Oh, yeah.
They look forward to it. It's that time, particularly when you get away from the administrative complex and you get out into some of our rural areas.
Right.
There's some old standbys that have been with us for years and years, and it's an opportunity for them to have that conversation with their neighbors in their community as they come in to vote. Not to encourage them who to vote for,
Right.
but just simply to be part of that community. It is a huge necessity that we have because the month we're taping this in the month of November. Veterans Day's here, and everyone really gets patriotic during this period of time. But those men and women fought for the freedoms, and one of those freedoms is the ability to vote, and that's so different than most of the other countries throughout the world, the way we do ours.
It really is, and voting rights have changed over the years. I'm sort of a fan of history, and if you look at some of the
Sort of.
if you look at early election laws, they were very restrictive on who could participate. You might have to be a landowning white male in order
Yep.
to vote. There were some states that if you fought in a duel, you could never vote again. So all sorts of interesting laws, but that has changed over the years. Women's suffrage, all sorts of voting rights have occurred across America, and it's really something that we should not take for granted. It's extremely important in our democratic process.
I may be putting you on the spot, but if I am, just tell me that. We have about 44, 45, 43 precincts. That varies. Most of the time there it's the same location, not always. Always trying to find places that meet the public's requirement. It needs to be ADA, where you have access for the issues that deal with ADA issues, easy access, of course. Most of the time we try to use them at public buildings. We do still use a few churches. That's getting fewer and fewer because of the liability issues. But our cities and counties and state buildings, we're able to use them. Our parks and recs, we use them. But let's talk a little bit about numbers. We got about 200,000 people in Williamson County, give or take, on any given day, a couple of hundred more moving in. How many registered voters would we have in Williamson County currently? And what can we expect over the next 4 years? Because the heaviest voting does occur in the presidential election,
Right.
which I'll just put a little side note there. I'm so excited about that. This county, under your leadership, handled the largest amount of people during the last presidential election. But I wish that many people would turn out for our city and county elections, but that just doesn't happen.
Exactly. We have 142,000 registered voters now currently in the county. And that there's an ebb and flow to that process. Part of it has to do, in a presidential year especially, we have a lot of people that are on our rolls that move somewhere else.
Correct.
And we purge those individuals when they register to vote in another jurisdiction. So, and then periodically we purge our rolls because of people that we believe have moved, and we go through a confirmation process with those voters. So last year during the presidential election, we had about 150,000 registered at one point, but this year, those voters that we found out were moved or were inactive for a period of time were removed from the rolls. So that's increased tremendously, of course, since I've worked in this office. I remember back in the days when we were right at 100,000.
I remember that.
And that was interesting when we topped 100,000. I remember that very well. But back in the 1980s, I think some of the figures I've seen, we only had around 35,000 registered voters. So and only really about a half a dozen or more precincts were open to the public then.
Just within the last month, we've had an election, a city election for Franklin. Very low turnout, in my opinion, a little over 9%, right at 9%, give or take a little. If you look at the early voting that was done, it was probably about half of that, not quite. But when you think about there's approximately 70,000 people in the Franklin precincts that are eligible to vote, and only get about 7,000 of them out to vote. makes you wonder, is it something in the process that we need to do, or is it the people are just happy, or do they not know the candidates? Whatever the issues are, I know that your office and the state under Trey Hargis are constantly looking for ways. This early voting, this registration online now is an effort to try to get more people engaged in the ability to vote. But at the end of the day, it's still left up to those individuals out there that they know their candidates, know the issues the best they can, because at the local level, whether it's city or county or school board race, those are where some of those serious decisions are made. I know that's not in your area. I know you have to stay neutral on all parties, and I respect that. But as I sit here and think about what could we do to better engage our electoral people to get out and find out about the issues?
It's really hard. We have a lot of voters that move in from other states, and they feel like they're not familiar enough with the local election process or the local issues enough. We do hear that quite often. I think there's just, and this trend goes nationwide. It's not just here. Local elected officials and local elections just don't seem to get as much attention as they used to. And I'm not sure if it's just because of the nature of the world we live in. We tend to be in a very transitional world these days, whereas back, 20, 30 years ago, people probably did not move around as much, so they were more familiar with what was going on.
Well, one of the things, like you said, you're one of the rare individuals in this county. You were born and raised here, and there are several that work within and without government. But clearly, our number one state, according to Matt Largent over at Economic Development and his team of people that move in to Williamson County, is California. And then you've got certainly other states with heavy presence of people here, certainly Michigan, Ohio, Illinois. And one of those reasons that people are moving here, we do have an award-winning school. But the other reason is there are good jobs here. There are plenty jobs in the Middle Tennessee area, so that one could live in Williamson County, maybe work in Davidson or Wilson or Rutherford or any of the surrounding counties, or they could work right here. And so you are correct. I've heard the same thing. They move into a community and they don't know really the people. They know the activities. They love the schools. They love this and that. But it does, it's always interesting to me what fires people up to go to the polls to vote. Now, I've been around 30 years in some capacity of electoral position, but it's always, the roads are bad. I'm going to vote for the person that can fix the road. And you and I both know that usually it's not a person issue, although that seems to be the rule, the way we run our political campaign. Talking about electoral, your job, in some states, you would have to vote for you to be in your role as overseeing all the elections here in Williamson County. But that's not the way Tennessee law works, and you have a board that you have to report to.
That is correct. Yeah, in some states, this is an elected position, which would be interesting to observe. But I am appointed by a 5-member election commission. Now, that election commission is composed of 3 Republican members and 2 Democratic members.
And I'm going to stop you. Isn't that interesting? And you're not allowed to pick sides or get into those conversations. You have to stay neutral. But who's ever the party of file of the governor, that's the way it's broken out.
Right, yeah, the General Assembly composition, the General Assembly dictates the composition of the election commissions in our state. And we have 95 counties, and they're all the same. So they have 3 Republican members and 2 Democratic members. And those individuals are appointed by the state election commission. They serve under their appointment, and they're appointed every 2 years in April of odd years. So our current election commission was appointed earlier this year in April and will serve through April of 20, well, it'd be 2019.
2019.
That's hard to say, 2019.
Well, it'll be here for you.
It will.
Chad, we have something that apparently we're going to talk about it with the assumption that it gets the county commission approval here in just a couple of days. And I think because I can't have you on the show every month,
Right.
but there'll be a call for a referendum to increase the sales tax from at the local level 2.25 to 2.75. It's a 50 cents on $100 that is written up in the form of a resolution. Will go to the ballot box for the citizens to vote. The county commissioners don't vote to raise it. They only vote to say, we'd like to have this opportunity for the citizens to speak. Do you want to increase the sales tax or not? That's a whole different discussion that we will have on this show as time goes on. But your role will be to oversee a special called election if it's approved within a certain time frame. Kind of talk us through that election, that process.
Well, ballot initiatives such as a sales tax referendum. Let me just comment just a moment on what we call ballot initiatives or referendums in Tennessee. A lot of individuals that move here are used to all sorts of ballot initiatives because those are what occur in the states that they move from. Tennessee is very limited in the number of referendums that can be held. There are many that deal with alcohol consumption, sales, that sort of thing. And sales tax is one of those things that a county legislative body can put forth to the people in order for them to ballot for or against the increase. So after the resolution is voted upon, I would receive a certified copy, our office that is, and we would have 75 to 90 days in order to hold that election. So that is the time frame. Once I receive that resolution, the clock begins to tick on the countdown to when that election has to be held. And this would be a county-wide election, so every election day polling place would be open on the election day, which would be determined by our 5-member election commission during that time frame. And there would be a 15-day early voting period. Even though there's one measure on the ballot, it is considered contested because you can vote for or against the measure. So that would be held beginning 20 days prior to Election Day. So it's really handled just like any other election that would occur in the county, but it's not on a regular cycle. So we're going to be holding an election that's not in a general time of year when an election would be held.
So do the same rules apply that if you wanted to vote, you have to be a registered voter prior to a certain amount of time also?
That is correct. In our state, you have to be registered to vote no later than 30 days before Election Day. So that would apply to any election that's being held. Some states it's not that way. It's 2 weeks. It's same-day voter registration. But in Tennessee, it is a 30-day window to be registered. So that would apply.
And when you go to register, whether it's for this upcoming special called election or it's one that will occur next year in year 2018, we will have a couple of primaries, Republican primary. Democrats holding the primary also this year.
Yes.
One of the first times in a long time.
Right.
For these different positions. Most of the county statutory positions are up for that period of time. That's being held, I think, in May?
May 1st.
May 1st. I was thinking May 2nd. May help. Thank you. So May 1st, and you will need to be registered 30 days prior to that.
Right.
And, of course, between the filing deadline of all the candidates, there'll be lots and lots of rhetoric about those individual candidates. But it's a very large-scale countywide election during those primaries.
I mean, it is. You know, we have around 300 voting machines, and we won't use quite all of those for the May primary next year. But our county's grown, so, and the size of our precincts have grown.
Yes.
In registered voter numbers. So by law, we have to have one voting machine per 1,000 voters. So if you have a 5,000 voter registration of 5,000 at a precinct, you know, you're technically supposed to have 5 voting machines.
And I need to tell you, interrupt you, we got 2 or 3 minutes left on our show, but one of the things I've just this week began those conversations. The year 2020 is when our census count is due again.
Right.
And so right after the first of the year in 2018, I'll be having shows on that during the course of next year. Talking about encouraging people, because it's census time, which is required by Congress.
Right.
For all of us, all of our little noses to be counted.
Right.
During this special time. Now, the city has special census data that they try to, and there's a reason they're doing that, is to receive more state dollars or federal dollars. But the county as a whole, the jurisdiction you and I lay claim to, we get one shot of trying to pull those numbers together in 2020. It'll be there. Chad, we've got 2 minutes left, and I may have overlooked something that you wanted to touch base on, and I'm sorry that I didn't touch on it. So here's your opportunity to bring up anything that maybe needs to be said.
Well, just want to thank you for having me today. You know, I couldn't do this alone. I have an excellent staff in our office. We work considerably well. You know, a stressful year, we all pull together and we accomplish what needs to be done. But we also rely heavily on our poll officials, and I would not be able to do any of this without them. So if you have any interest as voters of this county that are concerned about the democratic process, you know, we need you to work at the polls. And I know it's a 12-hour day, but we only ask you to do it about 3 days a year, so we feel like that's something that can be done pretty easily. But I do want to remind our voters about our Go Vote TN voter app. I'm not sure if this will
They'll
show
scan
up,
it in.
but that's a huge help to our voters. Everything's online these days, so the Go Vote TN voter app has all sorts of sample ballots, voting information, early voting information, and election day information.
And you're located in phone number, location and phone number. It's always important. People like to know, how do I get hold of it?
1320 West Main Street, Suite 140, right across from the county clerk. Our phone number is 615-790-5711. And our website is www.williamsonvotes.net.
Chad Gray is in charge of the elections, keeping them fair, keeping them honest. Does a great job. We thank you for your hard work. We thank you for your dedication to our community, about your service that you give. I'm Rogers Anderson. Thank you for being with us today. See you around.
Looking for me a ham. Red jerseys race over the green. Grim, cute girls on the field shout instructions to each other. Push up, pass, shoot. Strong and intent on the ball. Ponytails bob and swarm. That striker who just ran over a defender, bam, tomorrow will be the middle school homecoming queen. They slide, they fall, they learn to play, to win, to lose. Only the weak or scared stay clean.